Ethan sat in the lawyer's office with his heart beating fast. The air felt heavy, like everyone inside the room was waiting for something big to happen. Across the polished wooden table, his father, Richard, sat tall in his suit, cold and unreadable. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was sharp and heavy. "You are not my son," he said. "You are cut out of my will." The words hit Ethan like a hammer. For a moment, he couldn't even breathe. He looked at his father's face, searching for some sign of softness, some hint that it was a cruel joke. But there was nothing, only ice in Richard's eyes. Ethan's stepmother, Clara, leaned back in her chair with a faint smirk on her lips, enjoying the moment. His half-siblings shifted uncomfortably. None of them dared to meet Ethan's eyes. They looked away, pretending to study the floor, the ceiling, their nails, anywhere but at him. Ethan's chest tightened. "Dad, what are you saying?" His voice cracked. Richard's gaze did not waver. "You heard me. You will not receive a single cent. You mean nothing to me." The lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling the papers nervously, but stayed quiet. Ethan felt heat rushing through his body. He remembered all the years he had worked hard just to make his father proud, all the times he had swallowed his pride, hoping for one kind word. And now this, his father denying him not just the inheritance, but his very identity. Tears burned in Ethan's eyes, but he refused to let them fall in front of the people who wanted to see him weep. He turned his gaze to Clara, who was watching him like a cat watching a trapped mouse. That smirk on her face told him everything. This wasn't just Richard's decision. She had poisoned his father against him. The silence in the room felt endless. Ethan stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. His hands were trembling, but his voice came out steady. "If that's how you see me, then fine. But I swear, I will find out why you've turned against me." Richard's expression didn't change, but for a split second, Ethan thought he saw doubt flicker in his eyes. It was gone just as quickly. Without another word, Ethan walked out. His chest ached, his stomach twisted, but inside, something new was burning. A fierce need to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The office door closed behind him, but the words stayed in his head like an echo he couldn't escape. "You are not my son." Ethan remembered when he was just a boy, no older than 7, running around the backyard with a toy plane in his hand. His father, Richard, stood by the window, watching with folded arms. Ethan had hoped Richard would come outside, maybe clap, maybe smile, maybe just say, "Good job, son." But he never did. Ethan tried harder each day, working on school projects late into the night, bringing home good grades, even fixing things around the house to get a nod of approval. Most times, all he got was silence. His mother had passed away when he was only 5. He didn't remember much, only her warm hands and the way she used to sing to him before bed. After she was gone, the house felt colder, and Ethan held on to Richard even more tightly, desperate for his father's love. But then Clara came. Richard remarried quickly, and from the start, Clara treated Ethan like an outsider. She never shouted at him in front of his father, but her words were sharp when no one was around. "You're not good enough. Your father sees it. One day, you'll understand." She would whisper things like that, little stabs that cut deep into Ethan's heart. Richard didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. He was busy with his business, his growing family, and Clara always knew how to bend his ear. Over time, Ethan felt himself slipping further away from the center of his father's life. He was still there, but more like a shadow, someone tolerated but never embraced. Years passed, and Ethan grew into a young man carrying the weight of being unwanted. While his half-siblings were given the best schools, the best tutors, and all the support they needed, Ethan had to push his own way forward. After college, he found himself struggling to build a stable life. He worked 2 jobs, one at a warehouse during the day, another as a delivery driver at night. Sleep was a luxury, but he kept going. The truth was, Ethan still wanted to prove himself. He dreamed of starting his own business, something small but steady, something that would finally make his father look at him with pride. But without support, money, or connections, every step felt like climbing a mountain with no end in sight. The only person who never let him fall apart was Maya. She had been with him since college, and even when Ethan had nothing to give, she stood by him. She listened when he came home exhausted, she pushed him to keep trying, and she reminded him of his worth when the world tried to tear him down. Sometimes, when his chest felt heavy with disappointment, Maya would hold his face in her hands and whisper, "You don't need to be anyone else's son. You're already enough." Ethan believed her, at least in those quiet moments. But deep down, he still craved the one thing he had chased his whole life, his father's recognition. Money didn't matter, not really. What hurt most was that Richard denied him even the dignity of being his son. No amount of hard work, no sacrifice, no patience had earned him what he longed for, a simple word of love. Every day Ethan carried that emptiness. It pushed him to work harder, but it also burned inside him like an old wound that never healed. And now, after being cut out of his father's will, That wound was torn wide open. It happened late one evening when Ethan returned to his father's house to collect some old papers. The house was quiet, and he moved carefully through the hall so he wouldn't disturb anyone. As he passed by Richard's study, he heard voices. He was about to keep walking, but then Clara's sharp whisper froze him in place. "He's not even your blood, Richard," she said. "Why waste your fortune on him? Everything should go to your real children." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His hands clenched at his sides. He leaned closer, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. Richard's voice followed, low and heavy. "You think so?" Clara did not miss a beat. "I know so. Your first wife wasn't as pure as you believe. People talked, Richard. She had other men around when you were away on business. Do you really think Ethan is yours?" Ethan's chest tightened like it might burst. He wanted to storm in that very moment, but he stood frozen, every word sinking deep like poison. Richard let out a harsh sigh. "If what you're saying is true—" "It is true," Clara cut in. "Look at him. Does he even resemble you? Why should you give him the name, the money, the respect that belongs to your real heirs? He's nothing but a reminder of her betrayal." Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. He pushed the door open, his face pale with anger. "Stop it!" His voice shook, but it filled the room. "How dare you say that about my mother? How dare you whisper lies behind my back?" Richard's eyes widened for a moment, then hardened. "You shouldn't be listening to things that aren't your concern." "Not my concern?" Ethan stepped forward. His hands trembled, but his voice grew stronger. "You just let her call me a stranger in my own home. She's lying. My mother loved you. She would never." "Enough!" Richard's voice exploded, louder than Ethan had ever heard. His face was red, his fist slamming down on the desk. "Don't you dare speak to me like that. Clara has told me things you don't understand. Things about your mother. I trusted her, and she betrayed me. Maybe Clara is right. Maybe you were never mine to begin with." The words sliced through Ethan like a blade. He staggered back, staring at his father with disbelief. You actually believe her? Without proof? After everything?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I don't need proof. I see the truth clearly now. You're not my son." Ethan's throat felt dry, his vision blurry with tears he refused to let fall. He turned to Clara, who stood behind Richard with that same cruel smile tugging at her lips. For her, this was victory. For him, it was the deepest betrayal he had ever known. He looked back at his father, his voice quiet but steady. "If you choose to see me as nothing, then so be it. But I will not live under this shadow of lies. I will uncover the truth about who I am, even if it destroys everything you think you know." Richard said nothing. His silence was worse than shouting. Ethan left the study with his chest burning, the world spinning around him. The man he had worshipped all his life now looked at him as if he were a stranger. The lies had taken root, and there was no turning back. That night, Ethan swore to himself that he would dig into the past. Ethan couldn't sleep after that night. His father's words haunted him, circling in his head like a curse. "You're not my son." Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara's smug smile. He knew he couldn't just sit and accept it. If he was ever going to find peace, he needed answers. The next day, he started digging. He visited his late mother's old storage boxes, the ones kept in the attic of his small apartment. Dust clung to every corner, but he carefully opened them, pulling out photo albums, letters, and papers she had saved. He flipped through each page like he was searching for air. At first, nothing stood out, just ordinary family moments. Then, tucked deep inside a worn notebook, he found a folded letter. The handwriting was his mother's. His heart pounded as he read. "Richard doesn't see it, but Clara envies me. She watches every move I make. I worry she will turn him against me someday. I only pray Ethan grows up strong enough to face whatever comes." Ethan's hands shook. Clara's jealousy had started long ago, even before his mother's death. She had been planting seeds of bitterness for years, waiting for the moment to twist everything. His chest tightened with anger, but also grief. His mother had known, and still, he had been too young to protect her or himself. Meanwhile, Clara's grip on Richard only grew stronger. Richard called Ethan days later, his tone cold and final. "I've spoken to my lawyer. You are no longer part of this family. Don't come back here." It wasn't just rejection, it was legal separation. Clara had convinced him to cut Ethan off completely. Ethan's half-siblings didn't waste the chance to rub it in. At a family gathering he forced himself to attend, his younger brother sneered. "Guess who's getting the beach house now? Not you." Another laughed. "You should have worked harder to be Dad's favorite." Their words stung like knives. They paraded their inheritance in front of him, as if he were invisible. At home, Ethan finally broke down. Maya found him sitting on the floor, surrounded by old papers, his face buried in his hand. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "My father doesn't want me. My family mocks me. And now I don't even know if I belong to him by blood. What if Clara's right?" Maya knelt beside him, wiping his tears. "Don't let her lies destroy you. The truth doesn't hide forever. Get a DNA test. Prove it once and for all." Ethan nodded slowly, clinging to her words. It gave him a spark of hope, but when he suggested it to Richard, his father shut him down instantly. "I won't waste time on nonsense. I don't need a test to see the truth." It broke Ethan further. Even when proof could save their bond, Richard refused. Just when Ethan thought things couldn't get worse, Clara struck again. Ethan was called to his father's company for a meeting, only to be accused of stealing confidential documents. Papers had been found in his bag, papers he had never seen before. Security dragged him out, and before he could defend himself, the police were called. He spent hours in a cell, the cold walls pressing against his spirit. All he could think about was Clara's face, the satisfaction she must have felt setting him up. He knew she had planted those papers, but proving it was another matter. When he was finally released, thanks to lack of evidence, he walked out into the night with his head down. He felt smaller than ever, stripped of dignity, of family, of belonging. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just unwanted, he was being painted as a criminal. But deep inside, beneath the pain, a quiet fire grew. If Clara was willing to go this far to destroy him, then the truth she feared must be powerful. He promised himself he would not. The courtroom was filled with tension, every seat taken by curious eyes. Ethan sat at the front, his heart racing. For weeks, he had carried the weight of Clara's lies, but today was different. Today he was fighting back. His lawyer stood beside him, calm but firm, while across the aisle Richard sat with Clara at his side. She looked confident, her chin lifted, as if the outcome was already hers. The judge called for order, and the case began. Ethan's lawyer spoke first, laying out the story, how Clara had poisoned Richard against his son, how Ethan had been cut out, and how only one thing could settle the matter, the truth of his blood. Clara interrupted, her voice dripping with scorn. "He's chasing shadows. He has no right to claim what doesn't belong to him." The judge raised a hand. "Enough. This will be decided by evidence, not insults. A DNA test will be ordered." The words struck the room like a thunderclap. Clara's confident expression faltered for the first time. Richard shifted uneasily in his seat, but he did not object. Days later, the results came back. Everyone gathered again in the courtroom, the silence so thick you could hear the papers rustle as the judge opened the envelope. His voice was steady, but to Ethan it sounded like the world was holding its breath. "The test shows with absolute certainty that Ethan Parker is the biological son of Richard Parker." Gasps filled the room. Ethan closed his eyes as tears threatened to spill. He wasn't the outsider Clara painted him to be. He wasn't a mistake. He was his father's true son. Clara's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but the words died on her lips. Richard stared at Ethan, shock and shame written across his face. His lips parted, but nothing came out at first. Ethan finally stood. His voice was trembling but strong. "All my life, I wanted just one thing, for you to see me as your son. I worked myself to the bone, trying to earn your pride, but you never gave me that. And then you believed her lies over me, without proof, without even asking me. Do you know what that did to me?" Richard swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "Ethan, No." Ethan cut him off, his pain spilling out in every word. "You let her destroy everything between us. You let her whisper poison in your ear until you looked at me like I was nothing. Do you have any idea how it feels to have your own father call you a stranger? To carry that shame?" The courtroom was silent except for Ethan's voice. Clara shrank in her seat, her power slipping away. Richard's other children exchanged looks, their anger now directed at Clara. One of them muttered, "You did this to us." Richard leaned forward, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. I was blind. Son, please forgive me." Ethan looked at him, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He saw the regret in his father's eyes, but the years of pain, the countless moments of rejection, weighed heavier than any apology. For a long moment, he said nothing. His silence filled the room more powerfully than any words could. Clara was disgraced, her lies exposed in front of everyone she had sought to impress. The siblings turned their backs on her, furious at how she had nearly destroyed their family. Richard sat broken, reaching out for a son he had already lost in spirit. Ethan finally turned away. The truth was out, the fight was won, but the wound inside him could not be healed with a single sentence. He walked out of the courtroom with Maya at his side, his father's pleas echoing behind him. Ethan did not return to his father's house after the courtroom. For the first time in his life, he stopped chasing Richard's approval. It hurt, yes, but it also felt like freedom. He realized he had spent years begging for love that was never given, bending himself into someone he thought his father wanted. Now he was done. With Maya by his side, he started over. He worked long hours, saved every little bit he could, and finally opened a small business. A repair shop that grew slowly, built on his honesty and hard work. It wasn't fancy, and it wasn't handed down from anyone, but it was his. Every brick, every chair, every customer who walked through the door was proof that he could stand on his own. Maya was his biggest supporter. When doubt crept in, she reminded him of how far he had come. "You don't need their money, Ethan," she would say softly. "You've built something no one can take away, your own name." Her words became the ground beneath his feet. Years passed. Ethan's shop grew into a company, employing others who trusted him. He wasn't rich in the way Richard had been, but he was proud. He paid his bills, he helped people, and he slept at night with peace in his heart. That peace mattered more than any inheritance. Then one evening a letter arrived. Richard was sick. Age and regret had caught up with him, and he wanted to see his son. Ethan stared at the letter for a long time. Part of him ached. This was still the man who had raised him, the man he had once worshipped. But another part of him remembered every wound, every rejection, every time Richard had chosen Clara's voice over his. He went to the hospital once, standing at the doorway. Richard's face was thinner, his body weak. Their eyes met, and for a moment Ethan saw the man he had always wished for, a father who looked at him with love. But he didn't step closer. Richard reached out a trembling hand. "Ethan, forgive me." Ethan's heart twisted, but he didn't move. He had no anger left, only acceptance. He had already made peace with himself. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving Richard behind. That night, lying beside Maya, he realized something important. He no longer needed his father's approval to know who he was. He wasn't defined by Richard's will, Clara's lies, or his siblings' cruelty. He was defined by the strength it had taken to stand, to rebuild, to love, and to live without bitterness. The money, the inheritance, the family name, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Ethan had found himself, and in that, he was richer than he had ever been. Years later, Ethan stood by the window of his home, cradling his newborn son in his arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled around his thumb, warm and fragile, a piece of his heart he never knew could exist outside him. Maya watched from the couch, her eyes soft with pride and love. As Ethan rocked the child gently, memories of his father's voice drifted back, the cold words that had once broken him. "You are not my son." For a long time, those words had defined his life, shaping his pain and his hunger for approval. But now, holding his own son, he realized something deeper. "My father once told me I wasn't his son," Ethan whispered, his voice steady, filled with both sorrow and strength. "But in proving him wrong, I discovered something greater. I didn't need his name to know who I was." He looked down at the baby, a smile touching his lips. "And I promise you this, I will never make you feel the way he made me feel. You will always know you are loved. Always." The room was quiet except for the soft breaths of the newborn. Ethan pressed a gentle kiss to his son's forehead, sealing a vow that stretched beyond words. It wasn't just about being a father. It was about breaking the chain of hurt, about giving what he had longed for all his life, unconditional love. In that moment, Ethan knew he had closed the circle. He was no longer the boy begging for his father's recognition. He was a man who had found his own worth, and who would pass on something far greater to the next generation. Hey besties, thanks so much for watching till the end. Ethan's father once told him, "You are not my son," and cut him out of his will. But the truth came out. Ethan was his real son all along. Instead of chasing wealth, Ethan built his own life, found strength, and vowed to love his child differently. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.